Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Arkadiy Baltser. He's the founder and CEO of Plutoview in Boston, Massachusetts. He's turning software into a collaborative experience. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Hi, David. Thank you for having us. Really exciting. Yeah,
So before we get started, just for the sake of our audience, can you give us a little more background on Plutoview and what you're trying to solve?
absolutely. So we're building a co-browsing solution. We're actually one of the first ones to start working in that space in the technological sense of the word, not in the kind of, market sound of the word definition, because co-browsing did exist before that. When we're talking about customer support, giving agents the ability to see what's going on your screen to kind of solve customer issues more efficiently. We're talking about a revolution in the way we take on remote collaboration. What I mean by that is think of all the applications that we use for work. I mean, search engines is the ideal example because they have everything, right? They were initially built to be used by a single person, and it makes sense. But the world that we live in today, it's different. And what Plutoview does is we virtualize applications, which means that we move them to the cloud and we enable an unlimited number of people to collaborate in those applications, which means that you're basically using your go-to search engines like Google Chrome the same way you would use Google Docs, if
And
that makes sense.
how did you come about discovering this problem in the first place and then wanting to make the efforts to solve it?
I mean, this is massive. The whole problem rose from the education space, and we started working on this even before the first wave of COVID. So before the first lockdowns, before the pandemic hit us, because a lot of work that was relating to classes, to projects, was done remotely. And I was in school back then. I was in BU. I mean, I was faced with this issue all the time. It's the problem of screen sharing not being enough. I mean, you're in your dorm room, you're preparing for a presentation, but you gotta do billion gazillion different tasks at the same time. And what's more scary is you gotta do it collaboratively. But screen sharing has only one shareable screen, right? So you're doing one thing at a time, so that everybody can see what's happening. And that's good, but it's good for demonstration, but it does really nothing for effective collaboration. And there was actually a class where we were preparing for an economics presentation. What we did, there was like four of us or five of us, I don't exactly remember, but each of us had two separate devices on the table with two different Skype accounts, right, open at the same time, just so we could have two separate Skype sessions go on at the same time. We had, the actual deck on one screen with like comments and stuff like that, and research going on the other screen. Incredibly horrible process that nobody should go through, but it gave us the effectivity that we needed at that time. And that was the day that I realized, look, something needs to change. Screen sharing is good, but we're in a different world now.
And then when you started building this, what was the MVP that you had in mind, and how has it changed from where it was then to where it is today?
Absolutely. It was actually very close to what we have now. The idea was like, look, let's take the applications that we use and somehow make them virtual. And in the technological sense, there's few directions that you could take. I mean, obviously at this time, we're already not alone in this space, and there's a lot of amazing companies working on co-browsing. And there's many different directions that you can take. You could, build special screen sharing protocols that are, innovative and that are not the old screen sharing that we're used to. You could go the route that we're going, which is full-on virtualization route, building cloud architecture that could support, tens and hundreds of applications and user sessions at the same time. That's a whole different route. Because basically what we're doing is over time, we're going to be accumulating a library of virtual applications. That's not just search engines. Obviously, it's open source technology at this time, just because it's easier and simpler.
Right.
Search engines, Visual Studio Code, right? All those tools. But eventually, we are going to be talking with for-profit applications, and obviously, this is going to take a more of a kind of a marketplace approach, with virtual applications being the major thing. But this is, long way from now. The initial product was search engine that's virtual. That was the MVP. Basically, make a search engine inside a search engine. So basically, from your Chrome or Firefox or Safari, whatever you use, you go into Plutoview website and you open up a whole separate browser in that. And so basically the way our first MVPs looked like is you as one user would be able to kind of type in plutoview.com, launch a virtual Firefox session, and that tab in his Safari browser, Chrome browser, whatever it is, would be that virtual session of Firefox. His teammate would launch their own Firefox session and share that with the person. Now there's two tabs in your browser with two different Firefox sessions. You're switching between tabs, you get the full experience of multiple devices in front of you. That was the initial MVPs that we were going after. And we were actually kind of successful. I mean, we launched in Product Hunts, became #1 product of the week.
That's really cool.
Right. I mean, that was amazing. We're actually preparing for a relaunch coming up in a month or so. That's going to be awesome. And I'll get to that in a little bit because we're relaunching with our API thing. And that's phenomenal. That's massive. That's actually the most interesting thing. And something that I'm getting to right now is we launched on Product Hunt as a workspace, right? Bringing that whole thing to remote teams, right? You could launch your virtual applications, share those within people in your team, collaborate effectively, finish tasks, finish sprints. And then we were like, look, what do we really want to get out of this? We want to change the way people collaborate remotely. So we need to take an approach that is more wholesome, that is more holistic. We need to change this. We need to solve the problem more wholesomely. And that's when we realized, look, we need to take the API approach. We need to bring this amazing technology that we built as an integration to all the other solutions and platforms that are dealing with collaboration and that need this extra next step into remote collaboration. And that's basically what we're doing right now. Plutoview is a co-browsing API integration. Currently, we have Firefox virtualized. I mean, we're working with phenomenal guys from teamflow.com, teamflowhq.com, Hallway.com. I'm not in a position to give any other names because we're still in talks, but right, there's a lot of demand because we see that the world that we're living in is changing. You know, all the Facebook, all the other places that we used to collaborate in, right, are becoming more and more synchronous. Because that's a really interesting thing, because in early 2010s, we were basically in a situation where the whole remote collaboration market could go two directions. And interestingly, it kind of went both, but we'll get into that. It could become more and more asynchronous, or it could become more and more synchronous. Right. And there's benefits to both, right? There's enormous benefits to both. Now we realize that, look, the way we thought synchronous collaboration is, it's not, it's limited to screen sharing, limited to single user applications. That's just not the reality anymore. So basically what we're doing here is we're saying, look, there's two approaches, synchronous and asynchronous. The question could be much more interesting.
So what led you to want to go down the path of virtual applications on the cloud versus just a streaming of a user's, call it whatever they see visually, as well as sharing keyboard and mouse control?
Right. Because I mean, we're waiting for a revolution. We're trying to make a revolution here. And what I mean by that is, look, the age of downloadable software and single user software has come to pass. I mean, it's about making things more accessible, because it's ultimately about progress, because progress literally depends on the tools you have in your arsenal, the access you have to those tools, and the brains, other people that you could share those tools with. That's literally that's an equation for progress. I mean, that's how you move forward. The way to make this a thing in the remote environment is to think broader. So solving this problem by, making another screen sharing protocol, that solves the problem just partially, because really the key and the core of the problem lies deeply in the way we're used to structuring our work life and the way we're used to interacting with applications. And that's basically single-use applications and downloadable software. We want to move applications to the cloud. We want to make them, hundreds of times more accessible. You wouldn't have to download it on your computer. You could just call it on demand from the website, right? And allow other people in, right? Because we're used to sitting in the same office, 5 people at the same table, 5 devices in front of them. You could look over the shoulder of your partner,
Right.
type in, vice versa. That's how you get things done, effectively. We don't want to waste time doing stupid things. We want to get them done quickly,
Right.
experience all that other stuff. That's what we're doing. We're making that happen in the remote environment. And that's why virtualization over anything else, because it's about building the environment that allows that to happen in a way that actually works. So it's building the virtual environment, building the network. That's what we're about. And that's why the decision to pivot into the API space was both so timely and so wise. Just because initially we prepared for this. We built everything for scalability. There's actually a bunch of technical things that we could get into, because virtualization is also not the limit. There's many other ways. There's many ways within virtualization that you can structure it. And there is a way that everybody does it, and there's a way that nobody does it. And the way that nobody does it, we're taking that route just because it's literally the most innovative route, and it basically has to do with containers instead of full-on virtual machines. It's about orchestration. It's about getting the most out of virtual resources and actually planning them out accordingly. So it's basically about scalability. And we went into solving this problem with this in mind. So the whole pivot into API and let's solve the problem more holistically was just a thing that made sense.
What about scenarios where the demands of the software is generally relatively high and the latency between a computer and a, I guess, cloud solution is performance prohibitive? For example, scenarios of like, I don't know, video editing, image editing, like compiling large projects of code. Like, how do you see your solution fitting into those like use cases?
I mean, absolutely. I actually have a friend who's building a online video editing tool that has this Figma aspect to it, this remote kind of Figma type collaboration aspect to it already inbuilt. And so this problem is also a thing, right? People are solving this. People are doing a phenomenal job at solving it as well. So to answer your question, it's a work in progress, right? The reason we took the special technological route that we took with virtualization and orchestration and all that is to ease exactly this thing that we're talking about. Is to make it more seamless. There is latency. That's a thing, right? But we have an incredible team of engineers that are working on making this a non-existent issue. And a lot of this has to do with the way Linux works. A lot of it has to do with the way actually virtualization in itself works. We're restructuring a lot of things, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have some patents come out of this, just because it's a massive problem, and it's not just a problem for us. The whole latency issue,
Right.
in terms of virtual instances of virtual applications and all other virtual stuff. This is something we're working on really, really heavy, and a thing that we're actually releasing right now for our customers is where we're actually having 3 different types of products, which basically we call them planets. That's just kind of our corporate jargon. 3 different types of planets with different memory capacity. So if you know that, look, my platform is driven by video creators and video content publishers, and we know that the use case for them is going to be a lot of online video editing stuff, a lot of stuff that's heavy, then it's our mission to give them the tools that allow for that. So that would mean planets that are much more powerful than the others one would be, right? It's about that, but it's a work in progress. And obviously there's a lot of exciting stuff on the technological level that's going to come out of this. That actually a lot of people will benefit, not just our industry, not just virtualization for the benefit of remote teams, but also optimizing your CI/CD processes. A lot of things are there's a lot that's going to come out of this in the next few years, not just from Plutoview, from all the other companies working in the area.
Do you anticipate supporting scenarios where like there's other things necessary other than just like memory and CPU? Like what if you need like special hardware to run certain programs? And is that something you're like trying to consider? Or are you trying to tackle the more generalizable case first?
Right. You're absolutely correct. We are tackling the most general case first, but that's the beauty of having the whole thing run on the cloud, because in the cases that you just described, it's about tweaking the cloud architecture, not about tweaking the capacity of your computer. That's what we're trying to get to, and that's what I mean by making things more accessible. And that's a bigger goal and a more futuristic goal, right? But the things that, for example, Stadia are doing at Google Stadio, I think that's the right way to pronounce it, is amazing. I mean, and very similar to what we're doing in that sense as well. So I hope I answered your question.
I guess to elaborate on it, you see, I'm thinking of industry giants, kind of like Microsoft Office and or like Adobe Suite, where like they have a incentive to keep their like ecosystem walled off from others, just because they want to, like, I guess, maximize their profits or keep people, or their users are simply accustomed to working with software a certain way. And I'm wondering how you envision the future of collaboration tools with tools like, I don't know, any of the Adobe programs playing out in the future. And I recognize it's purely speculative, but I'd love to know your thoughts.
Right. I mean, my count right now, I believe there's 226 companies working in remote space, most of them based in US, and that's startups, right? Obviously, Microsoft Teams included, right? But that's just me giving you perspective on how various and variant the space is. I mean, there's a lot of things being done outside of Microsoft and Google and other giants, because it's good, right? It's good having all the resources in the world that you would ever need, but bureaucracy is obviously a factor, not a good factor, especially when we're talking about real technology and innovative technology, because time is a factor, right? You have to be on top of it. You have to be quickly. And so, I mean, obviously the tendency we see is the giants, buying off this cool new technology from the little guys. But we initially took a different approach. We were like, look, we don't want to compete with Microsoft Teams for, a team from Boeing that's going to be doing some remote project, right? We don't want to be doing that. We want to make the Microsoft experience better and all the other companies' experience better. That was the big thing about moving to the integration.
Okay. And imagine during this project, you must be collaborating with lots of people remotely yourself, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Most of our team is based remotely. I mean, our tech team is scattered through Eastern Europe, US. I mean, we're everywhere.
One of the common questions I'll ask in the podcast is like, what features do you know how to like, or what features do you prioritize in terms of into building into the platform? But I recognize, I guess, if you're using it internally, that gives you a lot of insights into what people want.
Right. I mean, and we're fortunate enough to work with very active teams like TeamFlow. I mean, so there's no shortage of feedback, definitely.
What was the first piece of feedback that you received? Like when you first had this idea, I imagine you like shared the idea verbally before you built it, and then you put it into some like smaller community before you put it on product. Like, what was the process of that?
It was. And getting back to what we started from, I mean, we initially launched in the kind of education space, and I thought that, look, I was crazy enough to think that, look, we're going to go to MIT and Boston University and say, guys, you need this, and they would buy this from us, right? And unfortunately, life doesn't work that way, especially with educational institutions. I mean, sales cycles are 6 months, if not more, 9 months. I think 9 months is in kind of an average sales cycle there, and then we moved to digital academies. Because I mean, the use case was always there. I mean, look, there's people studying, there's people collaborating. I mean, what students are doing, that's basically the definition of active collaboration. So that's what we're here for. So digital academies, coding schools, all those places. We started talking to them, tutoring platforms, and the biggest feedback that we actually got from a tutoring platform was, guys, you have to start working on an integration, because we don't want our students moving from our internal platform to some other internal platform. We want to have this technology integrated into our platform, because obviously a lot of tutoring schools, they have either their internal products pre-built or they're using products that they're satisfied with, and we're not trying to replace the whole paradigm of remote collaboration, which is messaging, which is video conferencing. There's so many different aspects. We're just about this collaboration thing. We're just about making the applications that you use for work actually collaborative. So yeah.
So I recognize you started slightly before COVID, so you have a little bit of data pre-COVID and a lot of data during COVID. Like, how do you see internally how COVID has affected your teams, like, I don't know, either velocity, product adoption, etc.
I mean, it changed everything. COVID changed everything in a sense of ultimate acceleration. I mean, we see in what year that has passed, year and something from the beginning of COVID, we see, tens of companies thinking about this space, doing incredible things in this space, and obviously the spark of kind of creativity in the space, the effort, the attention the space got. I mean, that's phenomenal. In a sense of what, look, remote collaboration was always a thing. If we look at, Google searches graphics from like 2008, we'll see that remote collaboration searches was always alive. It was always growing. Obviously, in 2020, we see a spike, but it doesn't disturb the general tendency. It was always going to be so. COVID just took a giant projector, right, and just put it on this issue. And we saw how much else we could do to solve this. And that's the biggest thing that COVID did. Obviously, COVID is a horrible thing. It took lives. It changed the way we travel. It changed a lot of things. But it also showed us there's a lot of empty spaces in the way we work. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the way we work. And obviously, that remote collaboration was always a thing. And this is my firm belief that a lot of remote teams and founders of remote companies only during COVID have figured out that, look, we've been doing something wrong. Just because only then you actually feel this. You see, because all of us have engineers based remotely. Did we ever think about, except big companies that actually, put in a lot of money into that kind of stuff, but did we ever think about how do we engage them, right? Is work engaging for them? Is it as exciting for them as it is for the people that are in the office next to you? All those things, I doubt we ever thought about, or at least thought about enough to do something about it, right? And that's the biggest thing that COVID did.
Once you got the product hunt feedback, was that the point where you're like, I have to commit my next few years to this? Is that what gave you the confidence, or were you confident before the product hunt feedback?
I was confident before.
Okay.
Because we did a lot of things before product hunt feedback. We launched pilots with tutoring academies, and we've got incredible feedback from teachers, remote teachers, from actually IT teams trying to collaborate. So we had a couple of interesting pilots. What product hunt changed is, I saw that this is going to be big. That was the day I realized, look, this is going to be big. And I guess the level of seriousness changed. The level of stress obviously changed, but level of seriousness changed, but nothing drastic. It was always going to be that. It was always there because the day I came up with the idea of Plutoview, I knew that this is going to change a lot of things, especially in the way we collaborate. And yeah.
Once you had the idea, how did you acquire your first, call it like 10 users?
It was difficult. Obviously, the most difficult part was to even begin explaining what we're building and what they're going to be getting out of this. Because the first thing was like, okay, but how is this different from screen sharing? Like, so used to screen sharing.
Yeah.
And then you go into like this 30-minute conversation explaining that this is absolutely not the same thing as screen sharing, that it's completely this new thing, that you have all these other options that you could do with this tool. You could actually collaborate remotely. Think of Google Docs, all that stuff. It was a difficult process. But obviously, product hunt was a big thing because we spiked in terms of inbound almost initially, and I believe Hallway.com also building an amazing thing for students, basically kind of a digital classroom platform. Really cool thing. They found us that way. A lot of companies found us that way. That was actually how we thought, look, it seems that all these companies need us more than the single users. Let's do the API. It's always difficult. It's difficult to find the first customers because it's not just about finding the first customers. It's about finding your market fit. Right. It's about finding your ground. Because you're selling to people and they feel through the bullshit. They see through the bullshit. So unless you find your ground and you feel like, look, you are bringing something that they need, you will fail. So it's important to find your ground, know what you're doing, know that it's needed. So I'm a big believer in the whole sprint thing. So before you close your first customer, you should already be talking to 20 different customers, potential customers, figuring out what you got to do. So it's a work in process. And the biggest thing is that, look, if you're in a B2B space, never disregard partnerships, never disregard, small companies, because it might feel just like a little network thing. Like you're talking to someone, that person might become your first customer. That's always possible. Always be open to those things. I just had an enormous conversation with enormous for my profit, because I got a lot out of it, with Alexander Galkin, founder of Computera. They're an amazing company doing all these great things. You could read about them. Amazing company. They're going to be a unicorn, no doubt. I think they're almost already a unicorn. I'm not sure. But Alex said, look, you're closing your first customers. And we were actually discussing the pricing model. And I was like, what's the best way I should structure our pricing model early on? It was like, look, stop giving a shit about pricing model. Doesn't matter. Throw it away. Take it all up on the individual basis with each customer. Take it on the case level. Sell to each customer. Do what you got to do to sell to each customer. Don't think about a unified general pricing model. Sell. Do what you got to do to sell. That's ultimately the thing.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, you got a lot of your early users inbound. Is that right?
All of our early users inbound generated. Early customers. Okay. Not all early users, because there's a big difference, right? Okay, especially B2B API. Yeah. All of our early customers are inbound generated. Gotcha. And that's Pioneer.app, also an amazing thing. Anyone that's early on, that's looking out to test their product, see if their idea is good, look up Pioneer.app. It's an online-based accelerator started by Daniel Gross when he left YC. It's a phenomenal experience. It's basically structured like a competition. So you actually get to test out your idea every week. You get feedback on your idea every week. And you get to kind of rise in the hierarchy. And eventually, if you win, you kind of get into this whole network of other entrepreneurs. That was a big thing. Because, Team Flow, we found through Pioneer.app. That was big.
How did you discover all these resources? Because I think you're one of the younger entrepreneurs we've had in the podcast, but you seem quite knowledgeable for your age.
Yeah, I started really early. I was one of the first employees at mywebm.com, building personalization tools for internet, a Silicon Valley startup. Amazing team, phenomenal idea. We were working closely with, Google VR, because eventually we're actually building this VR spaces for your personalized rooms that would correspond with the content that you kind of intake on the internet. So a TV in your room would be all the saved YouTube channels and Netflix recommendations and that kind of stuff. So I started on really, really early, and I realized, look, this is something that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Building products, coming up with amazing ideas, building teams. Because honestly, the most exciting thing that I think is the most fun is actually not building products, it's building out teams. That's phenomenal. That's what you enjoy most. The building talent and growing talent, facilitating. That's the thing that's most fun. But so I knew early on that that's something that I'm going to be doing. My first startup was that I did by myself with a partner, actually, but just like outside of everything else, was News Hunch. We were working on gamifying news content. So basically kind of turning your morning routine of news consumption into a fun game where you could actually predict the outcomes and that kind of stuff. And I was quite young. I was actually applying to university already with a startup, and my application was basically driven by this whole thing. Look, that's what I'm dedicating most of my time to. This is going to be big and all that stuff. And they seem to like me, so I entered into the educational academic space. I actually studied philosophy, which is something that I'm extremely passionate about. Something that I will return to eventually. I eventually 20 years from now, I will get my doctorate because it's just a fascinating space. But I came into university with already a plan. I knew that academics is important. I love philosophy, but all that is for myself. For the career and everything else is my startup. And from my day number one, I started mixing those together. So I started collaborating with professors. I started, finding young students that wanted internships, and obviously we were a startup. We didn't have any money, so let's benefit both, right? We give you an internship, you get credits, we get free work, right? So that's how it started. And step by step, I got myself to Plutoview, and this is basically the thing that I'm stuck with for, a long, long time. Our exit strategy is IPO. Our exit strategy is as big as you could think, because I know I can grow this into a massive thing, because it's meant to be massive. The idea is massive. Realization is massive. We have phenomenal engineers. We have Neil Raya. Unfortunately, he's not well at the moment. He's going to be getting back to us in January, but also a phenomenal engineer with wonderful experience from IBM, Microsoft. So it's two things that matter if you're young and you're getting into entrepreneurship. You want to build your first company. You want to build your first startup. Just two things matter. Revenue, throw that away. That at this moment, that's irrelevant. It's the team and the product. The idea, you could put the equation sign in front of that, the idea, the product, same thing, and the team that gets to build it. So network. It's again, same thing like with your customers. The acquaintance that you by mistake had, that person might be your next big lead, might be your next customer, might be your co-founder, might be your CEO. So it's always important to keep your eyes open, keep your mind open, and don't be afraid. We all have to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere. Nothing happens like this. You got to start somewhere, and go on. The biggest thing is being persistent, being patient, and being persistent. That's it.
So you mentioned philosophy as a passion of yours, and something I've noticed actually it's quite a common thing for a lot of entrepreneurs to have a deep interest in philosophy. Can you elaborate on what you find so interesting? Which subsection of philosophy captures your interest the most?
Absolutely, it's philosophy of science, and that correlates with what we're building, what we're doing. Just because, we get into this world without a vision, without a pathway. We have to find this pathway ourselves, right? So all those giant questions, that's what, at least for me, that's what fuels the interest in philosophy. There's big questions that got to be answered. Philosophy is a science. It's actually a science. It's not as sciencey as physics, but in all of its right, it's as science. It's the science of life. It's the science of the way humans function. It's the way life is structured for us to function. So obviously, it makes sense why so many entrepreneurs are interested in philosophy, because it's the same drive that get us into entrepreneurship, into building new things. It's the same desire. It's the same curiosity that gets us into asking all those questions. And actually, people that get into other sciences like biology and physics, they're basically experiencing the same drive, which is curiosity.
Is there something you've been learning in the past year that you wish you knew caught 3 to 5 years ago?
Yes, the importance of accounting. The importance of accounting. It's at least for me. It's always something that I kind of pushed it aside a little bit, right? Really important to know accounting. If you really want to have kind of a global, a big picture of what you're doing, and if you want to have a hand on your pulse all the time, it's important. I guess it's actually kind of to go beyond that. There's always these little things that you kind of move aside that are important. So I guess the biggest thing is start journaling. Don't keep those things away. Write them down, elaborate on them. Because the biggest thing that the biggest fuck up, the biggest thing that is becoming too stale. It's becoming too stale. So in any region of your life, if you feel like you're getting too stale, start journaling, start writing things down, get yourself a little bit active. That's how you feel better emotionally. So again, answering your question with accounting, but I'm trying to answer it more globally. It's about paying attention to the small things. It's about keeping track of the little things that you think you have to know, the things you have to do. Keep track of them. That way you're not going to get stressed. That way you're going to, I hope I'm making sense. That's the biggest thing. Because the last year, I mean, you're asking me a question like, what is the biggest thing that I learned last year? The last year was just a tornado for me. It was a hectic, chaotic tornado of us launching API. I mean, working on our first big partnerships and so on. So many different things happened. And it's about, still not getting lost in all those things and keeping track of actual growth, because actual growth is always structured growth. It's always pre-planned growth. It never happens on its own.
Do you find that you have enough time to balance all these new initiatives for your company as well as like your personal life?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No way.
And as long as you know the trade-off is there, I guess you have to recognize
Yeah.
everything's a trade-off.
trade-off is
Yeah.
Exactly. The trade-off is there. But I mean, I know amazing people that somehow manage to, have an incredibly fulfilling personal life and still run amazing businesses. And I think that comes with experience. I think that comes with experience. Early on, it's difficult to manage, but more you get into it, easier it is.
Would you say you have any regrets in the past 2 years of building out your current company?
Yes. Yes. It has to do with building out our team, paying more attention to the soft skills over hard skills, paying more attention to the person that you're going to be working with. Because that I think that's the biggest takeaway is like hard skills that are the things that you can work on. If a person has phenomenal soft skills and you know that you're going to be working well with that person, hard skills are going to be, they're going to get learned. There's no way they're not going to get learned. They're going to get learned. Soft skills are the things that's hard to get in, right? Those skills are difficult to work on. And vision is the binding thing of your team. Your team has to have the same vision. Obviously, not word for word, but it has to be the same thing. Once that vision is in place, you're bound for success. Because everybody's charged and incentivized to go to that vision, to get to that vision. It's very important to get people in your team that are not just super amazing engineers or amazing marketers or just incredibly genius people. It's about people that want to work with you and that see your vision and that feel that vision and want to get there as much as you want to get there.
What are some of the traits that you see in leaders that you look up to that you're trying to build within yourself, as well as the next generation of leaders you're trying to raise within your company?
Open-mindedness. I think that's the most important thing in any space. Once you're open for growth, growth mindset. That's the most important thing, because it's about person feeling that spark, that curiosity spark. The same thing that got me into philosophy or into building Plutoview, and building on it, growing it. Because talent, genius, that's all an outcome. That's not an initial thing.
Right.
That's not a priori. That's not the spark
Right.
is. The curiosity is. So that's the most important thing. If I see that the person is bright, is that, the eyes are shining, they want to get to work. They're passionate about this. That's the most important thing.
Okay. And then the last question I have for you is, what advice would you give founders or soon-to-be founders who are watching this episode?
Don't expect this to be a merry journey. This is going to be difficult. This is going to be hard. You have to be incredibly patient, incredibly persistent. But I guess that's the way life is programmed. You are bound for success if you keep on doing it. If you keep on going, persistent and patience and persistence, you're bound for success. And listen, that's a life hack. That's the way life is structured, that programmed. Patience and perseverance. That's it.
As a follow-up question, where do you draw these principles from? Like, do you have a mentor you learn from? Do you have favorite books? Do you have personal experience that you draw upon? Like, what's your primary source of learning, like large life principles and large business principles?
I'm incredibly fortunate in this sense to have an older brother, Artem Fedyaev, founder of Grubber.io. They found with his wife. They founded Grubber.io, incredible startup, one of the most successful startups in travel slash kind of businesses. Incredible thing. They're actually building. They're actually building out. They're actually building out a fintech branch out of Grubber. An amazing idea. It's going to be a kind of a banking software. Really cool. And so obviously he's a big thing. He's a lot of things that I'm going through. He already went through. So having a chance to kind of get on the phone with him, talk through a lot of things, that's massive. If I would have one mentor in my life, right, that would be him. Obviously, as I mentioned, right, he founded Grubber.io, mywebroom.com. That was his first startup, the startup that I started working with early on. So, right, but also books. And doesn't matter if it's nonfiction or fiction, it's learning how to concentrate on a storyline. It's learning how to give yourself fully to one thing specifically, how to immerse yourself either in a storyline, right? That it teaches you life lessons. Books teach you life lessons. Books actually give you wisdom. Like no joke, kids. Books give you wisdom.
I believe it. I love books.
Right? So fiction, nonfiction, read as much as you want. Read whatever you want, mangas, comics, whatever it is. Read because it learns you, it gives you an opportunity to experience life in a different way. When you experience life in a different way, through somebody else's eyes, you gain wisdom, you gain knowledge. So I guess answering your question, really fortunate to have my older brother, founder of Grubber.io, and a shit ton of books.
Do you have a favorite, like 1, 2, or 3 books, or most impactful 1 or 2 books?
Science fiction, love science fiction. Strugatsky brothers, look them up.
What did they write?
Science fiction.
Okay.
Science fiction. They're out of Soviet Union, but it's literally the most deepest. It's so philosophical and it's so deep and it's so human. Doomed City, wonderful book that gets into what we are as humans and how we function, how we collaborate. Actually, it's a really cool book. Snail on the Slope, one of my favorite books by Strugatsky brothers. There's really anything that you most of their books except 4, I think, were translated into English, so you could find them online. They're wonderful writers. Science fiction. Philip K. Dick, a U.S. science fiction writer. Amazing science fiction writer as well. I know a lot of your listeners probably know him because he's pretty famous. There was actually a TV show that came out quite recently based on his novel. And I guess to finalize this, I give you two other names, and that's philosophy. It's going to be Kant, the person that revolutionized philosophy, changed the way we see things and feel things and know things. Kant and Wittgenstein, just because the other big thing that I'm interested in philosophy is philosophy of language. And that ties closely to both programming, because it's also languages. It's how we syntactically structure things, think about things. So Wittgenstein, also a big revolutionary guy, that if anybody's interested in philosophy, you got to know those 2 names, Wittgenstein and Kant.
Have you read *Sapiens*?
Great book.
Okay, I figured if you haven't, you'd probably really enjoy it if you like those.
Great book. Anything that has words in it and that makes sense, that has a good book. I don't care about the message. If it has a message and it's structured clearly and it gives you some sort of enjoyment, it's a good book. Read it.
Okay. Well, Arkadiy, thank you for your time. I just want to leave you with the opportunities. What's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you and follow you along your journey if that's something they'd like to do?
I'm trying to get more into social media. Okay. I'm trying to get into Twitter. That's a big goal of mine. Hopefully you'll be able to find me there soon. I mean, Instagram, Facebook, you can find me anywhere. My email is pretty easy to guess. That's the name of my company and my name. So you can always email me if you really want to, if you want to discuss anything. I'm extremely open. If anybody's, I don't know, trying to get into remote collaboration, wants to just discuss their product or anything, feel free to email me. I'm always open, and I'll try to make it work.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again for your time.
Thank you, David. Have a great day.